He was sent to sell a forgotten ranch, a place swallowed by time, silent for 80 long years, listed for just $1. Lucas Grant, a seasoned 58-year-old real estate agent, believed it was just another sale, another story the world had stopped listening to. But buried beneath the rotting floorboards, he and his loyal German shepherd uncovered a sealed letter, one that whispered of betrayal, lost soldiers, and a treasure stolen in wartime. What began as a routine sale became a journey into buried sins, forbidden love, and redemption across generations. A story where courage, faith, and one dog's loyalty would bring light to a century-old darkness. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and may God bless everyone watching. The morning sun hung low over the Wyoming plains, a pale coin behind a veil of mist, casting the abandoned fields in a dull silver light. Lucas Grant stood beside his pickup truck, hands deep in the pockets of his worn brown coat, surveying the property that locals called Whispering Acres. 300 acres of silence, bordered by crooked fences and ghosts of cattle long gone. Lucas was 58, tall but slightly stooped, with hair the color of ash and a face carved by both laughter and loneliness. His blue-gray eyes, sharp yet kind, reflected years of reading people and empty rooms. Once a respected real estate agent in Cheyenne, he'd learned that houses didn't just sell, they spoke, in creaks, drafts, and echoes. Maybe that was why he'd never truly stopped listening, even after his wife, Margaret, passed away 3 winters ago. Grief had hollowed him quietly, like termites eating through the beams of a forgotten home. He exhaled, the vapor curling in the cold. "Well, buddy," he murmured, turning to the German shepherd waiting patiently by his side. "Looks like this one's ours for the day." Buddy was 6 years old, broad-shouldered with a thick tan coat streaked with black down his back, his amber eyes bright with intelligence. A retired rescue dog, he had once searched avalanche, wrecks, and collapsed buildings, trained to smell despair and hope. Now, he followed Lucas everywhere, as if guarding what was left of his master's soul. The ranch's driveway was overgrown with brittle weeds. The main house, a 2-story structure of gray timber and rusted metal roofing, leaned slightly to one side like a tired traveler. Shutters banged softly in the wind. Lucas noted the decay automatically, rotting porch boards, cracked window panes, sagging eaves. But beneath the ruin, there was a dignity that hadn't yet died. He pulled a folded document from his coat. The seller's name was Henry Wallace, age 83, residing in a retirement home across the state. The note at the bottom of the page caught his attention again. Sale price, $1. Condition, the cellar beneath the house must remain untouched. No demolition, no excavation. Lucas frowned. $1, he muttered. That's not a sale, that's a confession. He stepped onto the porch, boards groaning beneath his boots. Buddy sniffed the air, tail rigid. Inside, the air was thick with dust and something older, perhaps time itself. The living room was frozen mid-century, floral wallpaper peeled like dry skin. A rocking chair sat by the window, still swaying slightly as though someone had just left it. Lucas's professional instincts stirred. Every property had a reason for its price. Termites, foundation damage, toxic mold. But this was something else. He had seen strange deals before, properties where owners paid buyers just to take the land. Houses that screamed at night, but never a legal clause forbidding entry to a cellar. He walked through, each room with careful steps. His flashlight beam cut across faded portraits, warped floorboards, and the faint smell of smoke from an ancient fireplace. Upstairs, a child's bedroom still had a mobile hanging from the ceiling, paper stars spinning in the draft. It was both haunting and heartbreakingly intimate. Buddy's growl from downstairs broke the silence. It wasn't aggressive, more uncertain, the kind of sound he made when something didn't fit. Lucas descended the staircase quickly, his boots thudding on the old wood. Buddy stood stiff near a far corner of the living room, his ears forward, tail motionless. "What is it, boy?" Lucas crouched beside him, scanning the spot. The wallpaper here had bubbled and split, revealing crumbling plaster. He tapped the wall. It sounded hollow. His heartbeat quickened. He fetched his multi-tool and began to pry gently at the edges. The plaster gave way, and beneath the faded paper he found an outline, an old wooden frame, about 3 feet high and narrow as a pantry door. Someone had painted over it long ago. Lucas hesitated. His rational mind told him this was just a storage space sealed decades ago, But another part, the part that loved stories and mysteries, whispered something different. He felt that same electric unease he'd felt when Margaret's doctor first said incurable. That awareness that once you open a door, nothing stays the same. He swallowed, pressed the latch. The small door creaked open with the slow, aching sound of wood long forgotten by light. A draft of air drifted out, cool and damp, smelling faintly of soil and rust. The beam of his flashlight caught a set of steps descending into darkness. Buddy whined softly. His paws shuffled, but he didn't retreat. Lucas's mouth went dry. "Cellar's off limits," he whispered to himself, remembering Henry Wallace's strange condition. But then again, secrets don't like being locked up. He lowered one foot onto the step. It held. The second creaked ominously. Dust rose like smoke in the narrow beam of light. The air grew colder, thick enough to taste. Iron, mildew, maybe even salt. When his boots touched the earthen floor below, Lucas swung the light around. The cellar was small, with stone walls and a dirt floor. Old canning jars lined one side, filled with what might once have been preserves, but now looked like tar. Rusted tools hung neatly from nails. And then, in the far corner, his beam froze. Something, some shape, was half buried beneath the soil, under the remains of a collapsed shelf. It wasn't a chest, not quite, but rectangular, made of dark wood mottled by moisture and time. Lucas took a slow step forward, his breath echoing in the cramped space. Buddy stayed at the doorway, whining low, hackles rising. Lucas knelt, brushing away the top layer of dust. The wood was engraved with faint lines, patterns, symbols maybe, though too eroded to read. He touched one carefully, tracing it with his gloved finger. It felt oddly warm, though the air was freezing. And then, a sound, a faint tapping, not from upstairs, not from the wind. It came from inside the box. Lucas froze, his body locked between disbelief and terror. His rational mind scrambled for explanations, rodent, dripping water, echo. But no, this was deliberate, rhythmic, like someone, something trying to be heard. Buddy barked sharply, a single warning note that echoed off the cellar walls. Lucas stumbled backward, his flashlight trembling in his grip. The tapping stopped. Complete silence. He turned the beam toward the stairs, his only way out. The small door at the top had swung shut, softly, without a sound. And from behind him, in the stillness, came a whisper, so faint he almost thought it was his own breath. "Don't dig too deep, Lucas." The next morning came wrapped in fog, the kind that blurred the horizon into a pale gray smear. Lucas Grant had barely slept. The whisper from the cellar, the way it had known his name, played in his mind like a broken record. Rational explanations eluded him. He'd locked the cellar door before leaving last night, yet a faint draft still seeped through the cracks, carrying the scent of earth and something older. Buddy had spent the night restless, pacing by the front door, ears twitching at sounds Lucas couldn't hear. By dawn, Lucas had made coffee strong enough to wake the dead, though it barely touched the fog in his mind. He needed answers, or at least something tangible to hold on to. He decided to start with the cellar again, this time in full daylight. Dust danced like spirits in the sunbeams slicing through the broken window as Lucas descended the stairs. The air was thick, but not as cold as before, as if the darkness had retreated. The wooden box still sat in the far corner, silent now, its surface glistening faintly with moisture. Lucas crouched beside it. "All right," he muttered. "No ghosts, no nonsense." He tapped the box lightly with his flashlight, hollow. He tried the lid again, but it was fused shut by rust and time. Buddy stood at the base of the stairs, eyes fixed on the wall. Then, without warning, the dog stepped forward and began scratching furiously at the brickings behind the old tool rack. "Buddy, stop!" Lucas reached to pull him back, but froze when he saw the brick shift slightly under Buddy's paw. It wasn't part of the wall. It had been fitted there deliberately. Curiosity prickled through his fatigue. Lucas fetched a flathead screwdriver and pried it loose. Behind the loosened brick was a cavity no bigger than a shoebox. Inside lay a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. He lifted it out carefully, heart thudding. The cloth crumbled under his fingers, revealing a yellowed envelope sealed with wax, the initials E.M. pressed deep into the seal. Lucas's pulse quickened. The date scrawled on the corner read, March 3rd, 1942. The handwriting was elegant but trembling. The ink faded to brown. He turned it over and noticed faint red stains on one edge. Blood or rust, he couldn't tell. He didn't open it immediately. For some reason, it felt sacred, as if he were holding someone's last words. Upstairs, he made space on the kitchen table, cluttered with dust-covered ledgers and survey maps. Buddy lay nearby, head resting on his paws, but eyes alert, following every movement. Lucas broke the wax. The paper inside was brittle, its folds ready to tear. He unfolded it slowly and began to read aloud. If you are reading this, then truth has escaped the graves they dug for it. They took him at midnight, said he was a thief, a liar, but I know better. The gold they claimed he stole was never stolen. It was earned, promised to those who never came home. The land hides their payment, the proof of what they did. Don't trust the men who smile in daylight. They guard the blood money of the fallen. Forgive me, for I must hide it before they find me. E.M. Lucas sat back, breath caught halfway in his throat. The words echoed too close to his own past, the corruption he'd seen in property dealings, the way greed reshaped truth. But this was older, heavier, drenched in something almost holy. He looked at Buddy. Gold, missing soldiers, a cover-up. What the hell did you find, boy? He refolded the letter with care, sliding it into a new envelope. If E.M. was real, maybe someone in town could tell him who she was. He packed the letter, locked up the house, and drove the truck down the rutted dirt road toward Haven Ridge, the nearest town. The Haven Ridge Public Library stood on Main Street between a shuttered bakery and an antique shop. The red bricks were chipped, but the white trim gleamed under fresh paint. Inside, it smelled of paper, cedar, and quiet. Rows of tall shelves framed the soft yellow light pouring through the stained glass windows. At the circulation desk sat Evelyn Moore, a woman in her mid-50s with chestnut brown hair streaked with silver, tied neatly in a low bun. She was tall and graceful, with a kind of quiet strength in her posture. Her olive-toned skin and thoughtful gray eyes gave her the air of someone who had weathered storms but learned to smile through the rain. Evelyn was known in town as the type who remembered not just your name, but your favorite book, and always slipped a comforting word into conversation. Lucas approached hesitantly, removing his hat. "Excuse me, ma'am. You're Ms. Moore, right? I'm Lucas Grant. I found something strange on a property out near the ridge. Thought maybe you could help me read it." Evelyn looked up, her smile warm but curious. "Mr. Grant, the real estate man, yes? I've seen your signs. What sort of strange are we talking?" Lucas placed the envelope on the counter. A letter, dated 1942, signed E.M. At the sight of the initials, Evelyn's face went still. The color drained subtly from her cheeks. She reached for the letter with trembling fingers, running her thumb over the seal. "May I?" "Please." She unfolded the paper delicately, her eyes scanning the faded lines. Lucas watched as her expression shifted, from confusion to disbelief, then to a deep, aching sorrow. When she finally looked up, her voice was almost a whisper. "This handwriting, it's my grandmother's." Lucas blinked. "Your grandmother?" "Eleanor Moore," she said softly, sitting down behind the desk as if her legs had lost strength. "She disappeared during the war years. My mother said she worked as a nurse at a field hospital here before she went missing. No one ever found her body. They said she ran away with a soldier. But—" Evelyn's voice trembled. "This proves she didn't." Buddy barked once, breaking the tension. Evelyn startled slightly, then smiled faintly at the dog. "And who's this brave soul?" "Buddy," Lucas said. "My better half. He found the letter, actually." She leaned down, extending her hand. Buddy sniffed it cautiously before pressing his muzzle against her palm. Evelyn laughed softly, the sound carrying a warmth that tugged at something in Lucas's chest. "Smart boy," she said. Lucas hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "The letter mentions gold and missing men. Something about stolen payments, blood money. I don't know what it means, but it feels like more than family history." Evelyn nodded slowly, her eyes distant. "My grandmother used to tell stories when I was a child, about soldiers who never got what they were promised, and how greed can bury truth deeper than any grave. I thought they were bedtime tales." She looked up, eyes glistening. Maybe they weren't. Lucas leaned on the counter. "Would you help me figure this out? I'm not much of a historian." "I'd like to," she said after a pause, her tone steady. "Itenem sayas, but tinged with something else. Hope, perhaps, or longing. But if this letter is real, there might be people who wouldn't want it found." Lucas smiled faintly. I've been in real estate long enough to know every small town has a few secrets under the floorboards. Evelyn chuckled, shaking her head. Then we'll have to tread carefully. She placed the letter gently in a clear sleeve. I'll start by checking the town archives. My grandmother's name might appear in the wartime records. Come back tomorrow. And thank you, Mr. Grant. He tipped his hat. Call me Lucas. As he turned to leave, Buddy hesitated at the door, ears perked. The air inside the library seemed to change, subtle, colder. Evelyn looked past Lucas, toward the far wall where the stained glass shimmered faintly. Strange, she murmured. Did you feel that? Lucas frowned. Feel what? She hesitated, then shook her head, smiling again. Nothing. Probably just the draft. Outside, as Lucas walked toward his truck, he couldn't shake the feeling that the fog hadn't lifted at all. It had only followed him into town. Back inside the library, Evelyn watched him drive away. She turned the letter over again. On the back corner of the page, half hidden by age and dust, another line of faded ink revealed itself beneath the lamplight. To the one who carries the Grant name, follow the whisper where the soil breathes. Her hand trembled as the realization hit her. Grant. The wind had shifted that morning, carrying the scent of rain and tilled soil. Lucas Grant stood outside Whispering Acres with his coat buttoned to the throat, the old letter in one hand and a small spade in the other. The words from its faded page still echoed in his mind. Listen where the earth whispers. The phrase had lodged itself under his skin like a splinter, impossible to ignore. Buddy trotted beside him, nose to the ground, every sense alert. The dog had been restless since yesterday, his ears twitching toward the eastern fields as if he heard voices that no human could. Evelyn arrived shortly after noon in her old green Jeep, her hair tied back loosely, strands of silver glinting in the sun. She wore a thick wool coat over a cream sweater and sturdy boots, the sort of attire that looked both practical and quietly elegant. Lucas noticed the faint weariness beneath her smile, a shadow in her gray eyes that hinted at sleepless nights. "Morning, Lucas," she said, stepping out and stretching her arms. "I brought something that might help." She held up a weathered leather-bound book, the Haven Ridge War Registry, borrowed from the library's archive. Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Digging into secrets officially now, huh?" She smiled faintly. "If the past left breadcrumbs, we might as well follow them." They crossed the property, guided by the map Eleanor's letter had described. Fence posts no longer standing, a dry creek bed, and a stretch of land where the grass grew uneven, as though something beneath it refused to rest. Buddy stopped there, ears pricked, and began to paw at the earth. Evelyn knelt beside him, brushing aside the top layer of soil. Beneath it lay fragments of stone and splintered wood. "There's something here," she whispered. Lucas fetched a shovel from the truck, and together they worked for over an hour, their breath forming clouds in the cool air. The ground gave way reluctantly until a hollow sound echoed beneath the blade. A wooden beam emerged, rotted, half buried. Lucas cleared more dirt, revealing a low archway made of stone, collapsed in on itself. The entrance to what seemed to be an old cellar or storage bunker. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. "Well," he said, voice low, "looks like the earth was trying to tell us something after all." Evelyn crouched, peering into the dark gap. The air seeping out was cool and metallic, tinged with the smell of rust and oil. This must be where she meant. But why would my grandmother hide something here? Lucas shrugged. Maybe she didn't. Maybe someone else did, and she wanted you to find it. The words hung in the air, heavy and uncertain. Using a crowbar and flashlight, Lucas pried loose a few stones and widened the opening enough to crawl through. Buddy slipped in first, tail low but wagging, a soldier on patrol. Lucas followed, the beam of light cutting through decades of dust. The chamber beyond was small and half collapsed, but inside were relics, rusted helmets, canteens, a torn flag draped across a crate. The faint smell of oil and mildew was mixed with something more human, old paper, the kind that carried memory in its scent. Evelyn joined him, her flashlight trembling slightly as she scanned the walls. Her light froze on something in the corner, a framed photograph half buried under debris. Lucas brushed it off and handed it to her. The image showed a group of 7 young soldiers standing in front of the same ranch house, wearing uniforms marked with U.S. Army insignia. Their faces were weathered by war, but one of them, tall, with light hair and a crooked smile, caught Evelyn's breath. "That's him," she whispered, fingers trembling. "That's my grandfather, Samuel Moore. He died before I was born. Or so I was told. Lucas studied the photo. Looks like he didn't die here. Looks like he lived long enough to be part of something worth hiding. Before Evelyn could respond, Buddy barked once, sharply. Both of them turned toward the tunnel entrance. A figure stood silhouetted in the afternoon light. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, and neatly dressed in a gray suit that seemed too fine for the dusty farmland. His hair was dark, combed perfectly, his face clean-shaven but stern. The kind of man who looked out of place anywhere that wasn't an office or courtroom. When he spoke, his voice was smooth, practiced, the tone of someone used to being obeyed. "Mr. Grant, Ms. Moore," he said, adjusting the brim of his hat. "You've been busy." Lucas rose slowly, tension tightening in his chest. "Can I help you?" The stranger smiled thinly. "Name's Clive Hargrove. I represent the Silverton Development Group. We're finalizing acquisition of this property for restoration and tourism development. The seller mentioned you were evaluating it. We'd prefer you keep your exploration minimal for your own safety." Evelyn frowned. "Silverton Development? I thought this property was sold directly from Mr. Wallace." Hargrove's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Transactions like this often involve partnerships. We handle the logistical aspects. Whispering Acres has deep roots in this community, roots best left undisturbed." Lucas stepped forward. "If this land's so valuable, why sell it for $1? The man's gaze hardened. "Not everything is about money, Mr. Grant. Some things are about control." He reached into his coat, pulling out a business card, and handed it over. His hand was smooth, uncalloused, the hand of someone who had never lifted more than a pen. "Be careful where you dig. Some pasts have teeth." And just like that, he turned and left, his polished shoes crunching across the gravel. Lucas exhaled slowly. "Friendly guy." Evelyn stared after him. "He knew our names, Lucas, and he didn't seem surprised we were here." Buddy whined softly, his gaze fixed on the departing figure until he disappeared into the haze. That night, the wind rose again, rattling the windows of the farmhouse. Lucas sat by the table, nursing a cup of coffee gone cold. The photograph of the soldiers lay between him and Evelyn, illuminated by a flickering lantern. Outside, Buddy paced near the porch, uneasy. Evelyn traced her grandfather's face with a fingertip. "If he really worked with my grandmother, then whatever they were hiding, those men wanted it buried forever." Lucas nodded grimly. "And Hargrove's people are still guarding it." The sudden bark outside shattered the quiet. Then another, louder, urgent. Lucas was on his feet instantly. He grabbed the flashlight and rushed out, Evelyn following close behind. The air was sharp, acrid, the unmistakable smell of smoke. Buddy was barking furiously at the barn, where flames had begun licking up the dry wood. Lucas's heart slammed against his ribs. "Jesus!" He sprinted toward it, pulling his coat over his face as he threw open the door. Inside, fire spread fast across the hay bales. He yanked a tarp down and tried smothering it, but the smoke was thick, blinding. "Buddy! Evelyn!" he shouted, coughing. Buddy darted inside despite the heat, teeth gripping the edge of a burning tarp. Lucas tried to drag him back, but the dog lunged toward a wooden crate near the far wall, pawing at it desperately. For a moment, Lucas thought the animal was panicking, but then he saw it. Someone had smashed a lantern there, deliberately. He barely had time to react. The ceiling groaned, the beam above them cracking. "Out!" he roared. Evelyn was already at the doorway, screaming his name. He scooped Buddy into his arms and stumbled out just as the beam collapsed behind him, sending sparks into the night. The barn was an inferno within seconds. The orange glow lit up the fields, and the smell of burning oak filled the sky. Evelyn clutched his arm, tears streaking her soot-covered cheeks. "Lucas, someone set this. They were here." He nodded, chest heaving. "I know. They wanted the evidence gone." Buddy whimpered softly in his arms, his fur singed at the edges, but eyes bright, unbroken. Lucas ran his fingers through the dog's coat, voice low and trembling. "You saved us again, Buddy. You always do." As the fire roared behind them, something metallic cracked inside the collapsing barn, a sound like a chain snapping. Lucas turned toward it instinctively. For an instant, through the smoke, he saw a glimmer, something reflecting the firelight deep in the ground where the barn floor had split open. A flash of gold, then darkness. By dawn, the fire had smoldered into ash. Smoke clung to the charred skeleton of the barn, drifting like ghosts over the fields. Lucas Grant stood at the edge of the ruin, his coat smelling of soot and memory. Beside him, Buddy limped slightly, his paw bandaged, yet his amber eyes remained sharp, unyielding. Evelyn had stayed the night in the farmhouse's guest room, unable to leave him alone after the fire. When she appeared on the porch that morning, her hair unbound and glinting silver in the sunlight, she looked older, but not weaker, like someone who had seen the face of danger and decided to keep walking toward it. She held the war registry pressed against her chest. "I couldn't sleep," she said softly. "I kept thinking about that phrase, where the soil breathes. I think it's pointing us somewhere specific." Lucas poured 2 cups of black coffee, handed her one, and nodded toward the open field. "You're thinking of the oak by the creek, aren't you?" Evelyn's lips curved into a faint, sad smile. "My grandmother used to read to me under that tree when I was a child. Said it could remember the wind of every story ever told." They left the burned barn behind and drove out along the ridge road, the morning sun pushing through layers of fog. The fields shimmered with dew, and the whisper of wind through the dry grass felt alive, as if the land itself was breathing. The old oak tree stood near the bend of a shallow creek, its roots gnarled and massive, twisting into the soil like ancient hands. It must have been over 100 years old, its bark ridged and dark, its crown heavy with branches that moved in slow rhythm with the breeze. Lucas stopped the truck, the engine falling silent. For a long moment, neither spoke. The place felt sacred, too alive to disturb, too meaningful to ignore. Buddy jumped down first, sniffing along the roots. His ears flicked back, his tail low, as though sensing something beneath the earth. Evelyn knelt beside him, brushing fallen leaves away. This was her favorite place, she murmured. If she hid something, it would be here. Lucas pulled a small spade from the truck bed. "Then let's listen." They dug in silence, the sound of metal against soil blending with the gentle trickle of the creek. The dirt was soft, loose. Within minutes, Buddy began pawing excitedly at a spot near one of the thick roots. Lucas crouched beside him, clearing the dirt with his hands until the edge of a rusted metal box appeared. "Good boy," Lucas whispered. Together, he and Evelyn lifted the box out. It was heavy, sealed with a corroded clasp. Lucas pried it open with the spade handle, and the hinges groaned. Inside lay a collection of fragile, time-worn items, a small leather-bound journal, a few photographs curled at the edges, and several folded documents wrapped in oilcloth. Evelyn reached for the journal first. The cover bore the initials E.M., embossed faintly in gold. Her hand trembled. "This is hers," she said, her voice breaking. "My grandmother's handwriting." Lucas leaned closer, his breath steady but his heart pounding. "Read it," he said softly. The first entry began in precise, careful cursive. March 15th, 1942. "They said the gold was lost at sea. Lies. I saw them take it. Boxes of it, meant for the families of fallen soldiers. Major Bradford, Sheriff Harlan, Reverend Whitby, they hid it here beneath their own town, while mothers wept for sons they thought honored. Samuel and I couldn't stay silent. They called us traitors. They will come for us soon." Evelyn's tears fell onto the page. Major Bradford, Sheriff Harlan, she glanced up. Those names, Bradford was the mayor's grandfather, and Harlan, that's the same family that still runs Haven Ridge's police department. Lucas nodded grimly. Generations protecting their secret. He turned one of the oilcloth bundles and unwrapped it. Inside was a set of official documents stamped confidential, military ledgers listing gold shipments and allocations. Several entries were crossed out and replaced with new figures. At the bottom of one page, in faint pencil, someone had written, "Grant, missing in action, presumed dead." Lucas froze. "That's my family name." Evelyn blinked. "Lucas, what?" He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out the old photo they had found earlier of the soldiers standing in front of the ranch. He pointed to one of the men in the back row, young, with dark hair and familiar eyes. "That's him," Lucas whispered. "My grandfather, Thomas Grant. He served in the same division as Samuel Moore." Evelyn stared at the photo, realization dawning. "Then your grandfather was one of them, one of the men who tried to expose the theft." Lucas closed his eyes, gripping the photo until his knuckles whitened. "And they killed him for it. That's why my father never spoke about the war. He thought his father deserted. All these years, he carried that shame." Evelyn placed a trembling hand on his arm. "Lucas," her voice cracked, full of ache and understanding. "Your family and mine, they were on the same side." He met her gaze, and for a moment the years between them dissolved. The truth bound them tighter than blood could. The wind rustled the oak leaves above, whispering as if the tree itself mourned for what had been hidden so long. Buddy nudged the journal with his nose, and a smaller envelope slid free from between the pages. Evelyn picked it up, unsealing it gently. Inside was a letter, its ink faded but still legible. To my dearest brother, Thomas. If this reaches you, then I have failed to protect what we began. They have turned the town against us. Samuel and I will hide the proof beneath the oak where we first swore to make it right. Do not trust Harlan or Bradford. The gold is blood, and if you ever find this, promise me one thing. Do not let them bury you. The truth again. Lucas's voice trembled. Eleanor wrote to my grandfather. She called him brother. Evelyn's eyes widened. Then, they were siblings, he said, barely breathing. Eleanor Moore was my great-aunt. Silence fell between them, filled only by the soft rustle of the creek and the sighing of the wind through the oak. The truth rippled through both of them, two families intertwined by blood and betrayal, united by a promise that had spanned generations. Evelyn reached out, her hand finding his. Maybe this is why we found each other, she whispered, to finish what they couldn't. Lucas turned his palm upward, closing his fingers around hers. Then we finish it, he said. Together. As they stood there beneath the ancient oak, Buddy barked once, a sharp, urgent sound that echoed against the hills. Evelyn turned, startled. What is it, boy? Buddy had his nose to the ground again, paws digging at the soil, beside the hole they had made. Lucas crouched beside him. Beneath the loose dirt, something metallic gleamed faintly in the dim light. He brushed away more soil and found a narrow metal plate, engraved with a single symbol, a triangle enclosing an eye. Evelyn frowned. That's not military. Lucas shook his head slowly. No, that's something else. The wind rose suddenly, bending the grass and moaning through the hollow branches of the oak. It sounded eerily like a whisper, one that neither could quite make out, but both could feel. Evelyn looked up at him, her voice barely audible. Lucas, what if this isn't over? He stared at the symbol, the metal still warm in his hand despite the cold air, and said quietly, It never was. The sun was just beginning to sink behind the ridgeline, bleeding gold and crimson into the Wyoming sky, when Lucas Grant realized there was no turning back. The evidence lay spread across the farmhouse table, Eleanor's journal, the official ledgers, and the tarnished symbol plate that glinted faintly under the fading light. It felt almost alive, as though it pulsed with the heartbeat of the land itself. Evelyn sat opposite him, her hands folded tightly together. There was resolve in her gray eyes now, a steadiness born from loss and love combined. Buddy lay by the door, tail twitching restlessly, his gaze locked on the window as if expecting danger to arrive on the wind. Lucas finally broke the silence. If we don't take this to the sheriff now, they'll destroy everything. They've already tried once. His voice was low, but firm. Evelyn nodded slowly. You're right. But we can't trust just anyone. Sheriff Daniels might still have ties to the Harlan family. Sheriff Daniels was a tall, broad man in his late 50s, with thinning blonde hair and the kind of square jaw that once might have belonged to a hero. He had a good reputation in Haven Ridge, fair, calm, pragmatic, but Evelyn knew his lineage. His great-grandfather had been Sheriff Harlan, one of the men Eleanor had named in her journal. The bloodlines of guilt ran deep in Haven Ridge soil. Lucas tapped the journal's edge. Then we don't give them a chance. We go straight to the state investigators in Cheyenne. Tonight. Evelyn hesitated only a second before nodding. Then we leave before dark. They packed the documents into a metal briefcase, wrapped the fragile journal in cloth, and loaded everything into Lucas's truck. Buddy jumped into the back seat, ears perked. The road to Cheyenne would take 2 hours through winding hills, long enough for doubts to creep in, but Lucas forced his focus forward. The last rays of sunlight burned behind the horizon as they drove. They were halfway down the ridge road when headlights appeared in the rearview mirror, 2, then 4, cutting through the fog like knives. Evelyn turned in her seat. Lucas, someone's following us. He pressed harder on the gas. The truck roared, gravel spitting beneath the tires. The lights behind them grew brighter, closer. A black SUV, government issue, tinted windows, no plates. Lucas's pulse hammered. Hold on, he shouted. The SUV accelerated, bumping their rear bumper. Evelyn gasped, clutching the briefcase to her chest. Buddy barked furiously, his body tense. Another strike, harder this time. Lucas swerved, barely keeping control. The truck fishtailed as the SUV rammed them again. Then a gunshot cracked through the night. The side mirror exploded into shards. Evelyn ducked instinctively. "They're trying to kill us!" Lucas's jaw tightened. "Not if I can help it." He veered off the main road onto a narrow dirt path that wound through the hills, the one that led toward the old quarry. The SUV followed close behind, its engine growling like an animal. They reached the clearing near the quarry, surrounded by pine trees and mist. Lucas slammed on the brakes. "Out!" he ordered. Evelyn grabbed the Dufresne briefcase and stumbled out. Buddy jumped from the truck, hackles raised. The SUV stopped 30 feet away. The driver's door opened, and a tall man stepped out, lean, angular, dressed in a black trench coat that caught the wind. His face was sharp and pale under the high beams, with cold gray eyes that gleamed like steel. His hair, black streaked with silver, was slicked back. He looked refined, controlled, but there was something rotten beneath the polish. Evelyn froze. "That's him," she whispered. "Mayor Jonathan Bradford." Bradford walked forward with the calm of a man who owned everything he touched. "You should have left the past buried, Mr. Grant," he said, his tone smooth as glass. "Eleanor Moore was a traitor, just like your grandfather." Lucas's fists clenched. "They were heroes. They tried to stop your family from stealing from the dead." Bradford's smile was small and cruel. "History is written by those who survive, and I always survive." He drew a revolver from his coat. The metal gleamed under the headlights. "Now, hand over the evidence." Evelyn stepped back, her breath visible in the cold air. "You'll never get away with this." Bradford tilted his head. "I already have, for generations." He raised the gun. Time slowed. Lucas moved instinctively, pushing Evelyn behind him. The shot rang out. Buddy lunged, teeth bared, intercepting the bullet's path. The sound was deafening, the yelp that followed worse. "Buddy!" Lucas's voice broke. The dog collapsed beside him, a crimson streak marring his golden fur. Rage surged through Lucas, pure and blinding. He charged Bradford, slamming into him with all the force of years of loss and fury. The revolver flew from the mayor's hand. They struggled in the mud, fists and fury colliding. Bradford was stronger than he looked. A lifetime of privilege hadn't dulled his instincts. He swung hard, striking Lucas across the jaw, but Lucas didn't stop. "You destroyed everything they stood for," Lucas roared, driving his fist into Bradford's face. The man staggered back, slipping on the wet ground. Lucas pinned him down, rain starting to fall in sheets, washing the blood and dirt from their faces. "No more lies." Behind them, sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. Evelyn had managed to call the authorities. Bradford tried to rise, but Lucas struck again, knocking the wind from him. When the flashing red and blue lights finally flooded the clearing, Lucas released him and slumped to the ground beside Buddy. Two uniformed officers rushed forward, one of them, Sheriff Daniels himself. His expression was unreadable as he took in the scene. The wounded dog, the battered men, the open briefcase spilling its contents. "Good Lord," he muttered. Evelyn's voice shook. "The mayor, he shot at us. We have proof. Everything's in those documents." Daniels knelt, flipping through the papers. The moment he saw the names, Bradford, Harlan, his face paled. He stood, jaw set. "Call for medical and state backup. We're taking the mayor into custody." Bradford, cuffed and bleeding, laughed bitterly. "You think this ends with me? The roots go deeper than you can dig." Daniels met his gaze coldly. "Then we'll dig until the earth stops whispering." Lucas barely heard them. He was kneeling beside Buddy, his hands trembling as he pressed against the wound. "Stay with me, boy, please." Evelyn crouched beside him, tears cutting through the grime on her cheeks. Buddy's breathing was shallow, but his eyes flickered open. He looked up at Lucas with the same calm, loyal gaze he'd always had, and licked his master's hand once before his head fell back onto the wet earth. "Lucas," Evelyn whispered, her voice breaking. "He's still breathing." The paramedics arrived minutes later. They lifted Buddy gently onto a stretcher, covering him in a thermal blanket. Lucas followed close behind, refusing to let go of his paw. Days later, after the storm passed and the town reeled from the revelations, the truth was everywhere. The story spread through Wyoming and beyond. Haven Ridge built on betrayal, redeemed by truth. Bradford was convicted, his family's power broken. Evelyn stood beside Lucas outside a new building, a white-painted structure overlooking the valley, with a small wooden sign, Whispering Acres Historical Center. Inside, children's laughter echoed as school tours came to learn about the lost gold of 1942 and the bravery of those who sought justice generations later. Lucas had sold his business and left the city life behind. He wore simpler clothes now, flannel shirts, denim, the look of a man at peace. Evelyn ran the museum's archives, her smile softer these days, the weight in her eyes finally lifting. And Buddy, healed but walking with a slight limp, lay on the porch each afternoon, head on his paws, watching the fields sway. When the wind passed through the tall grass, it whispered softly, like distant voices finally resting. Lucas would sit beside him, one hand on his fur, eyes on the horizon. "The truth can sleep," he murmured, "but it never dies." Buddy's tail thumped once, slow and sure, as the last light of day spilled gold across the hills. Sometimes, miracles don't come with thunder or angels in the sky. Sometimes they come quietly, in the bark of a loyal dog, in the courage of a weary heart, in the whisper of forgiveness carried by the wind. Lucas thought he was just selling an old ranch, but maybe God sent him there to rediscover something far greater: truth, love, and the kind of faith that survives every fire. Every one of us carries hidden stories, old wounds, and buried dreams. Yet God has a way of uncovering what's meant to be healed. When we choose honesty over fear, compassion over silence, we help His light rise again from our own ashes. So, tonight, if you were listening to this story, take a moment to look around you. Maybe your miracle has already begun, in a friend who hasn't given up on you, in a memory that still warms your heart, or in a prayer whispered when no one else is watching. And if this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Leave a comment below. Tell us what miracle you're still waiting for. And don't forget to subscribe, so together we can keep spreading stories of love, faith, and redemption. May God bless you, keep you safe, and remind you, even in your darkest night, that His light never truly goes out.